Okay, what I want to talk about now is essentially putting together the previous two screens we talked about, setting up stocks and maintaining your stock information, your inventory, and the customer's accounts, and actually talking about placing a customer's order. So this particular menu here, Debtor Orders, in the Accrivia system, it's where we can create orders and quotes and invoices, though we can also create invoices from existing orders in a couple of other screens. There's other screens as well, but this is the main data entry. It's the hub of the operations, if you like, for the debtors system. So the way this screen works is that the bottom part of the screen represents the header on the docket. So it represents who the contact is, the order number from the customer, the date the thing's put in, all the stuff that would typically appear on the top of the header of a docket is on the bottom of the screen here. Then we press the items button, and that allows us to actually add the stock items onto the docket we want to build up. And at the end of that process, we then save it. So I'm just going to run through that process now. We would typically find the customer of choice by typing in their code, and as we type, this little needle sort of runs up and down and sets itself onto the one we're typing. So just for the sake of keeping things of ease on that first one we've been on so far, the customer list is at the top of the screen. Yes, correct. If we've got multiple companies in the system or multiple warehouses, we would choose the one that's applicable. I've got a few things like that turned on, but I'm going to ignore it for the sake of the demo and just stick with the generics. The date will default in, the initials of the person entering it. Now we know the person who's logged into our system because they've logged in, they put a password. We know a lot of things, but often what happens in an organisation is that there's a common computer where people can put customers' orders in, and so sometimes we don't know who entered that information because it's used by multiple people. So what we ask is that you'd key your own initials in, and it's not so much that we can come and slap you down if you got it wrong. It's more that if there's an inquiry to go with that, we know who to talk to. The order number here is the customer's order number, so typically they might give us an order number that goes with it. They might give us the person's name if there wasn't an order number, that sort of thing. The contact here is the person we're dealing with for that order. The phone number here, now these things are defaulting off the master file, I should say. If they're not filled in on the master file, they won't default, but that's where they're coming from by default. If the person placing the order had their own mobile phone number that was different to normal that's on the account, we could key that in. And this might be important information because when we send the delivery docket with the truck driver, if we're delivering the goods, and he gets to site, and if he can't find the person he's supposed to be meeting for unloading and that sort of thing, it might be applicable that he needs to actually grab the paperwork and call that mobile. So some of these things can be quite important. The required date is when the customer wants the goods. So we might put an order in today that's actually going out next Monday. So that might have a different date, and the required time is the time the customer's asked for it. Now we may not be able to adhere to that exactly, but if we've sort of said to them we'll have it on site by 8 o'clock in the morning, that sort of thing. Excuse me. Getting across here now, we've got the job name and the address fields. So the job name is what the customer will recognise this delivery. It's their language essentially. If they're doing Smith's job, and so when they get their appropriate paperwork, they can allocate the cost and charge their customers properly. Station Street, Burbank, for example. Just on that, we spoke previously about project pricing. If we had a project set up on this person's account, here is where we can double click and we can choose the project out of the list of valid delivery addresses. That will do two things. It will fill in the delivery address automatically, so I don't have to fill it in manually, and it will also hook up the pricing controls if there's special project pricing for that project, for that delivery address. So that's how that's interacted with. We can do it. We can also key the information in on this screen. We don't have to go back to the maintenance screen to set up new delivery addresses. So if we wanted to set up a brand new project for stuff that's going to occur on the future, there might be multiple deliveries going out to site, that's where we can do it. So once we've got the valid information down the bottom here, we press the items button. It's just warning that the credit limit's been exceeded for this account, and you can see here we've got some prompt notes. We spoke about that earlier, so this is where the prompt notes sort of interact with you for that account. Okay, I might just pause here and talk about the delivery system within Accrivia. What we've got is the ability to have as many different delivery zones set up as you wish. For each of those delivery zones, you can have a minimum price, you can have a square metre rate, and the square metre rate can be determined on any type of product group. So you might have a different square metre rate for 10mm board than you do for 13mm board, than you do for wet area board, or that you might do for cement sheet, because there's different weights involved and it might essentially cost you more to actually get them to site. So I won't go into that in this particular demo in full details. Once again, it's covered well in our manuals, but suffice to say, there's a lot of sort of scope around the whole delivery system to ensure that we charge the customer the correct amount for this particular order. So I'll just leave that on delivery A for the moment, which is probably, looking at that, as I'd say, that's a $40 Inc. GST minimum charge, which is what's showing up down in the bottom of the screen here as a starting point. So once I'm in here, I've now got to key in the products that go with this particular order. And this is also where one of the features of the Accrivia system sort of comes in, and we've got this thing set up we call the grid. Now, the grid allows me to, we can have upstairs and downstairs, or we could have single grid. So let's just say there was an upstairs element to this particular customer's order and a downstairs. It's a 2-story unit. We can set up a grid that logically groups all the products in a way, and usually we find that most people have sort of got one of these sitting on the desk anyway. We call it the order entry pad. People have got different names for it. And what we try to do to the best of our ability is to emulate the grid set up in the system, because it's user defined. This is not fixed. There are parts of it that are fixed. There's a certain number of columns going across ways, but going down ways we can go as far as we like. We can put as many entries as applicable. So you can see here in my demo data, I've got 10mm, 13mm, some ceiling, unispan, whatever your terminology and names is. I've gone and included a bit of cornice in my grid here. And then we've got what we call accessories pages. So now under adhesives or fixing or insulation, I can go and set up as many different products here as I like. So the whole purpose behind this is high-speed entry. The whole point is I don't have to think about the product codes. I just get to key in the quantities that go with that product code. So for example, I come across here, we might have 10 of those sheets, we might have 15 of those sheets, we might have 8 of them. Obviously some sort of takeoff's been done. Get into our villa board, we might have 12 of those to send out. We've got a fair bit of cornice of certain sizes, so we're going to send out 16 lengths or whatever the case may be. So all you have to do is to whip on round the screen with your arrows. You can use the mouse if you choose to, key in the quantities that go with the appropriate size, and the system's building up, as you can see down the bottom here, the number of square metres and lineal metres in the order. Then I can click across if I wanted to my accessories and say, yep, we're going to need 10 of those, we're going to need 2 of those. Probably don't need 10, might have 2 of them. We can talk about, there's up to 9 tabs we can have here, so might be 8 of those. You get the drift. The whole point is I don't have to actually pull up the codes. Now I can do that, I'm going to show you that in just a second. It's about high speed entry. It's about setting this area up such that you can drive the system very quickly and very cleanly. Once we've got what we want in there, we press the OK, and the system now keys each of those products into the screen back here onto the entry area. Now, just let me talk about this for a sec. On the left is where we enter the product code and the quantity, confirm the price. This big white area here in the middle of the screen is very much what we call the confirmation area. It's representing what's going to end up on their order or their quote or their invoice, whatever we choose to make. So once we've brought the grid information in, as you can see, the system's worked out the appropriate pricing for all those products. We've got the delivery that's now clicked into a square metre basis because we got above the minimum $40. We can see our square metres and our sheets and our weight down the bottom of the screen. And I can still add more product in. So I'm not limited to the grid. I could come in here, I could find something else. I could say I'd like 2 of those. The system's working out that the X rate is 2503 for this particular account. This is on the account called Abby. And when I press the add button, I essentially add it from my working area on the left across into the confirmation area on the right. Just to quickly cover the colouring, different options you can have, but the pink colour, it was red, but it's a little bit violent being red, so we sort of pulled it back to being a softer pink, if you like. That represents product where we don't have enough in stock to supply. So you can see here that we're actually overdrawn with our stock supply. Now that may or may not be true. We might have had an order come in from a truck. We haven't yet processed the paperwork, so we've got 2,000 sheets sitting on the ground. So there is that, but the system only is going to tell you what it knows. The white background, or grey when you click on it and make that one the focus, says in this case we've got 50 in stock. We've got 15 customers' orders already against that 50. We've got 20 coming in from suppliers, but right now the warehouse can supply 35. Because 50 less 15 is 35, and it's normally in a pack size of 10. That last bit's a bit of notation information. So that's what the colouring is all about. It's just giving you some indication of whether you're overdrawn in stock. Depending on the industry and depending on how you run the system, it may not be, might be totally irrelevant. It doesn't matter, because if you're not keeping things up with regards to your receives, then of course we won't have accurate knowledge. But if you are, then it may well be a point of interest for the operator to actually follow something up. This process is completed. In other words, we put as many stock lines on here as we wish to, until such time as we've covered everything the customer wants. Okay, so and talking about the grid, before we went upstairs, downstairs type thing, the system's detecting here I've been adding stuff in. That's fine. Are you sure you want to do that? Yes. So the first grid information we put in was upstairs. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that we actually want to break the order up into 2 lots, because we want to make a separation or a distinction between what's going to get delivered into the upstairs part of this apartment and what's going to get delivered into the downstairs. Just say, for argument's sake, for the sake of the demo. So here I'm actually going to create a second grid. The first one's called upstairs, the second one's going to be called downstairs. And as you can see, this has come in clean, because we're not bringing in all the information that's behind here already. We're actually starting a brand new grid. And once again, I can just basically key in the information I want to put in the system. Whip on. I'm just using my arrow keys to move around the screen here, and so on. Alright, so we'll call this the downstairs, press OK. Now that's been added onto the bottom of the previous order information. It doesn't add it to it, it's making a clean distinction. And at any point in time, if I click on that line there, this little number down here tells me, by the way, when I move my mouse around the screen, there's a hint down this bottom here at the toolbar. So as I park my mouse over any of the controls, you'll get some sort of indication down the bottom of the screen as to what that thing's about. So this one here is the actual grid number. So that's grid number 1. If I click on this line here, this is in grid number 2. So the system actually knows this, correct, the upstairs, downstairs. Yeah, that's right. The upstairs, downstairs is being reflected. It's called 1 and 2. It doesn't show the name, but behind the scenes it knows exactly what belongs where. Okay. At the end of keying all of this in, we now essentially have 3 options. I suppose 4 if you include cancel. Cancel would throw it all away and we'd burn it. I'm not going to do that. We can make this into an order, we can make this into an invoice, or we can make this into a quote. Now, a quote has no firm commitment. It's literally that. It's an estimation. It's a quote. We submit it to the customer on the grounds that we're hoping to win the job, if you like. So that doesn't have any impact on the system outside storing it on that person's account. We can load up a quote that's been previously saved and bring it back in here and then convert it to an order. So the process of going from quote to order is a very seamless one. We save it as a quote, we come back in here, we press the load button, and we can bring it back in. Okay? The order, to us an order is it's confirmed, it's going ahead, and we are going to book it into our schedule, whether it be our delivery schedules, whether it be us making sure we've got the stock available to supply the customer on the date we said we would. Whatever the scenario, it's a commitment to go ahead. And then the invoice button is, in my personal preference in terms of accounting talk, the invoice button to me says we are about to deliver the goods and we're going to run the truck out the gate, so it's appropriate that we now invoice the customer for what's leaving our warehouse, so as we don't ever run the risk of having delivered the goods but not billed the customer. Now, some people actually choose to invoice the customer after the delivery truck gets back, because sometimes they don't leave everything that they originally asked for, or they might have carried a bit of extra something and they give it to them. I've got no problems with that in a stricter sense, as long as the business processes of the organisation ensure that we then guarantee ourselves to invoice the customer. Put another way, if you wanted to produce a delivery docket to send out with the goods, you might take 2, so the customer signs one and you bring it back. That's all good. and then that person, the driver, might put that in the in tray somewhere, and someone who's in terms of the accounting side of things might come along, load that order up, and then invoice the goods because it's all gone. And if there was a short supply, or if we didn't send all the goods, or whatever happened where there was an alteration to the order, then obviously the person who's doing the invoicing can account for that alteration before we invoice the customer. So just to repeat myself, an order will go into the system as something to happen. An invoice says we're all done. We've supplied the goods, or we're about to, whichever way you run your business in an accounting sort of sense, or in a business process sense, and we're wanting to actually book it onto the account. Now, for the sake of having a bit more to show in the demo here, I'm going to actually make that an order at this point in time. Now, before I do that too, we were talking before about the notion of printing and emailing. If this customer's account was set up to email, be it an order, an invoice, delivery docket, whatever the scenario, then when we press the button, it will pop up, confirm the email address, once again depending on our settings. It can be silent or it can be interactive, and that'll go off to the customer. If we don't have the email sort of set automatically to occur, we've got a bunch of boxes down the bottom of the screen here that puts us in control. So I can choose to email this one out, even though normally the customer doesn't get an email. I can choose to print it or not. All of these things default either as ticked on or ticked off, depending on my personal settings and the way that account's been set up. So the process of what we get out at the time we complete the job, the order if you like, in the system, is determined by both my settings and also that debtor's account settings, but you're very much in control with the tick boxes below. And one other thing I might mention at this point in time, we can at this point also raise a purchase order to a supplier for the goods that's on our customer's order, and the system will tie the supplier order and the customer order back together. The classic example of when this might be applicable is if you're going to get the goods taken to site or brought to your warehouse from a supplier specifically for this order. So the customer might be a fair way away. You might have a trading relationship with another store. You've actually passed the order on to them and get them to do it. They bill you, and then you bill the customer. So in that situation, we want to issue a purchase order to that other organisation to actually do the job on our behalf. So rather than keying all that information in a second time in the purchase ordering screen, we can tick this create purchase order, and the system will go and raise the order for us. So I won't. It's tempting to do that, but I want to keep this process fairly clean for the sake of the train or the demo. So I'll just press order at this point in time. I haven't got any of my other things ticked in terms of printing and whatnot. It's warning me a second time that the customer's over their credit limit. That's now been saved. So if I'd chosen to print out the appropriate docket, etc., if we went onto the postings tab for the customer that we're working on, I go to orders, come down to the bottom. This is the one that we just keyed in a second ago, and you can see here's all the stock that's on it. I can right click on that and preview the order. This is an option. You can have, there's two ways we can present the order back to you. Option one is in a grid format. So you can see here that it's come out with the upstairs information's there. If I go over the second page, I've got my downstairs. So I've literally got 2 pages on my order that represents what the warehouse would use for picking the goods. Some people do that. Hello? Some people do that. Some people, though, elect to use a more standard layout, like this one. This might be a dispatch note. This is a more traditional sort of layout where we've got the stock items listed. Again, we're breaking down the upstairs and the downstairs. We can see the quantities, the square meters or the weight, that sort of thing, and we get some totals down the bottom. Alright, so yeah, what we're looking at there is a more traditional layout, and we can do that for the picking slip as well as the delivery docket or the dispatch docket. The stationery is all customised to suit exactly what the client might want. So we adapt it, if you like. Part of our actual installation process is to find out exactly how this sort of stationery should look and ensure that we get it all set up exactly as it's required. So just to wrap this process up, I want to talk about converting that order to an invoice. And in the system, there's essentially a couple of ways that can be done. The first is that we could go back into the order screen here. We could use the modify order button. We could find the invoice that that we're talking about. We can press modify. There's our prompt notes. And the system has brought that information all back in the screen as it was the first time. So we can now finalize it. The other couple of ways that we can do it, so I won't press invoice here because I want to show you another couple of ways as well, but if I wanted to, say in actual fact that they didn't take 2 of these, they only took 1, I could double click, change it to a 1, add it back in, press invoice, and that would actually complete the order to an invoice. We're all done. But let me put it back as an order, and let me talk about a couple of other menus here, the invoice menus. So the screen here allows me to convert existing orders into invoices. So I can't enter a new order here, I can only invoice an existing order. There's 2 modes, there's what we call batch mode and I suppose the non-batch mode. If I go into this mode, I can select the customer. The system will load in all of their open orders into the screen. And I'm in control on a line-by-line level on any of the orders that exist for this customer to actually invoice those goods out. So here's the order we just placed a moment ago. If I right-click on that, the system will fill in all of the quantities on that order to be sent. In other words, it's assuming the whole lot went. Now, you wouldn't use this screen in this mode to do that because there's more efficient ways of doing it. But what we can do is handle back orders. So, for example, they asked for 15 of that particular item. For whatever the reason, we might have been short on stock. We could only supply 10. So here they've asked for 15. We're going to supply 10. If I press the post button, that will raise an invoice for the 10. Everything else will get invoiced, and the 5 are now back ordered. So that's option 1. So if we've partially supplied and we're going to back order, this is how we do it. If we were actually sending the whole lot out, 2425 was the reference, I can go into batch mode and I can type in 2425 and press enter, and the system has brought that order up in all its glory, and we now can actually invoice the customer for that entire order in one hit. So let me talk about the process of those that have the truck go out, they come back, it's exactly as it was expected. We dropped off what we said we would, no more, no less. The process of invoicing that customer for the goods is as fast as coming in here and entering in the order number that went with that delivery, and the system will now bring us into this screen and we can invoice it out. And we can do as many orders as we like in this mode. That's why it's called batch mode. You can do lots of different orders for lots of different customers. You can't back order and you can't partially order. You've got to invoice the whole lot. So this works well when the customer has got what we said. You know, we've delivered to them what they asked for, no more, no less. But the point I want to make is there's 3 ways we can invoice existing orders. We can modify it manually and do so. We can come into this the debtor tab here and actually pick up that order and then individually do lines or the whole lot, whatever we want to do. Or we can go into batch mode and send the whole lot through in a hit. So those are our 3 methods. And just for the sake of having a bit of data in the demo today, I will post that. Push that through. The invoice has been done. I don't know if I printed. I might have. Yes, I should have turned printing off. Never mind. So if we went back now and had a look at this customer's account. Now I've used the red D on the menu there. It's exactly the same as clicking on debtor file debtor up there. So if we go and have a look on the postings on this person's account, there's the entry that we raised today, the invoice that's gone through. I could right click on that and preview it. I could print it. I could email it. All those sort of things. So here's the actual goods that we sent out. Again, this stationery has been it's just been created in our generic sort of demo kind of format. So I've just got the quantity, the square meters or linear meters, the per, XGST and a rate and amount, a total down the bottom. You can see you might have some banking details, how much has been already paid off this invoice. The stationery is entirely customized to suit each of our clients. But yeah, that's now gone through. That's an invoice on their account, essentially waiting to be paid under the normal trading terms. So that covers the process of using the orders and the invoicing menu. I'll briefly cover this verbally. I won't go into it for the sake of time, but we can raise a credit note by keying information in, and it's exactly the same process as creating an order. It's just that you don't get to create an order at the end of the process, you create a credit note. So the process is the same. Or we can credit note from existing invoices. Now certainly that would be, in my purest thinking, that would be the appropriate way to go, because we don't want to raise credits for people unless there's actually an invoice in the system to be credited. So that allows us to pick up the invoice, to pick up the stock that's on it and tell it the system the quantity to be sent back. We've got things like restocking fees. We can actually have a percentage of the value of that item that's essentially charged back to the customer, so it reduces the value of the credit as a restocking fee. That's supported. And the last thing to sort of talk about in this area, I suppose, is the point of sale terminal. Point of sale to us is the process of selling something to someone and receipting the payment for that those items immediately. So it's like a cash register, for putting it a better way. You've still got the grid. You've still got the grid available. I can come like through here. I could, I'm just being lazy now. I'm going to use this because it's going to be faster for me to do so. I can put the information in. That's been keyed into this screen, but as you can probably imagine, I can come in here and I can still pick up items in my point of sale screen as I normally would. This is all going on a point of sale account. It's like a cash register account, really. It's not a debtor's account, though it is a sale still in the system. You've got a whole bunch of things down the bottom of the screen telling you what's going on, and cash draws and things like that. When I'm happy with all of that, I can press my tab key to total the sale. So it tells me my total, and then I've effectively got to enter the method of payment from the customer. So they might have split the payment. They might have given me I don't know, $150 cash, and they might have put the rest through on their card. So we can split the tender method there. Once we're happy with that, we just press the enter key, and that's totaled off. The appropriate paperwork will print out, roll receipt or invoice on the laser printer, whatever you've got. We can support firing cash draws, all that sort of thing, and it's ready for the next sale. So that particular screen usually is in operation on the front counter somewhere for people who might walk in and just buy something, but that particular screen to do for account type things. But though you could book it onto an account using exactly the same approach if the person's standing there in front of you, though typically the debtor order screen is more the typical screen used for that. Or recording